I'm Shaun Bradshaw, one of the founders of Zenergy. My area of expertise, I guess, is, I have several areas I'm sort of known for. The biggest one, I did a podcast some years ago, and they called me the Minister of Metrics because I have a Southern accent, and we were doing this thing, and I was sort of preaching about metrics. So I got sort of known as the Minister of Metrics. But beyond metrics, I do a lot with agile transformations and QA management, setting up teams, things like that. And we've gone through with some of our clients a couple of, I guess, processes is the best way to define it. These processes where we set up teams on behalf of our clients. And there was a fairly recent project that we did, and it was a little bit different how we did it. It sort of took elements of different things we have been doing for years and kind of merged it all together into one cohesive program that we delivered for a client in Chicago. And that's where this talk actually comes from. It's this idea of how, as an organization, you may want to consider building out your teams for the future. And it really is a sort of a future look towards what we're doing. Now, before I get into that process, I like to take a step back in history. Now, you guys weren't even born. I'm going to go back to the 80s. So any of you remember the 80s, good days, good times? Yes. So let's take a step back in history. I'm going to go back to the 80s. And the reason I want to do this is I want to talk about how the test career, the test processing, what we do today, how it has changed over time. Back in the 80s, we had mainframe applications. We still have mainframe applications. I had a discussion with a guy that used to work for us. He was a graduate of UNCG, as am I. I'm an alumni from here. But I had a discussion with him, and he always gave me hell because I learned to program in COBOL. That was, one of the primary languages we learned. I'm like, dude, you don't understand. The world is run off COBOL. I can guarantee you, that any company you finance through nowadays probably has a COBOL mainframe application running in the background. A lot of banks still run off COBOL. If you want to deal with money, there's COBOL somewhere back there, right? So anyway, but we moved forward from there. But where were we in the 80s? It was, hey, how you doing? A lot of mainframe applications, very limited choices in terms of the types of technologies that we used. It was not uncommon at that time that the person who architected the system, designed the system, built the system, and tested the system, you had one person who was kind of soup to nuts, did it all, right? And so the limitation was not only limited to who did the work, but actually who used the system. So your user community tended to be very technical people, right? Much more technical. Now, that changed a little bit over time. We'll see how it changed, but it was very common for the individuals to be a very small subset of people, either highly specialized in either technical capabilities or something related to the business. It was what we call today customer-facing type applications, anything like that. And so our interactions with our customers were more through an individual who was an expert in that system. The example I often use is, today, if you purchase a new car and you want to buy car insurance, you're more likely to go online to fill out an application, right, than you would be to call an insurance broker. Some of us, I still have an insurance broker that I contact, but many of you probably just go online to do a lot of that now. But what would happen back then if there was a problem, the broker is the one that saw it, not us, right? We didn't see the problem. So it's changed over time. So that's the 80s. This is what we saw in the 80s. Now some of you get the joke. Not everybody. Office space, just that's the hint. All right, so let's move to the 90s. Now, in the 90s, we started to expand our technologies quite a bit, and we were looking more at client-server applications. With client-server applications, there was the opportunity that our user base expanded from those highly more technical people to include more business type users because of that broader range of technologies. Also, there started to be more specialization in the IT industry. So you found more people doing just testing, right? So this is the, and back then, in fact, I can remember interviewing people who wanted to be, they didn't want to be testers. They wanted to be developers, but testing was the easy way in, right? You went from help desk to testing to development. Any of you guys remember that? That was, in fact, I remember interviewing someone who said, you know, I want to be a developer. Well, why am I interviewing you? Because back then, that was, you had to be a tester first. That was how you earned your key. I was probably one of those weird people that, you know, I started out in support initially and then came into testing and just fell in love with it. There was nothing else I wanted to do. I like finding other people's problems. I think, you know, it's just a psychological thing. I don't know. Because of this specialization, we also, this waterfall concept, the siloed development environment where everybody kind of had their own thing. I mentioned this in the previous class. We had what we call I-based skill sets. That is, if you were a tester, that's all you did. If you were a developer, that's all you did. Today, of course, we look more for what we call T-based skills. That is, you know, you have the main thing you do, testing, but we broaden our horizons where our value to the organization is greater, and so we may do some development, we may do some business analysis, we may do some training, et cetera, et cetera. But it's all based on that one initial column. Another interesting thing happened in the 90s. Prior to the 90s, the idea was that, you know, if you wanted a new application created, you had to ask IT to do it. It was, you know, IT was kind of their own thing. It was research and development mostly, right? And so they were just kind of on the forefront. They ran the show. But in the 90s, especially with some of the ease of use, the WYSIWYG, the GUI interfaces and things like that, the newer, more updated systems we had available, IT began to really serve the business more, and we saw a lot more applications that were being driven from the business as opposed to sort of the research and development side, and then just kind of giving the business what we thought they might be able to utilize. And that's, you know, kind of equate to the 90s. So everybody knows Jimmy Fallon, but you guys probably don't know SNL. He used to be on SNL in the 90s. All right, those just didn't go over as well as I thought they would. I thought I did a good job, but maybe it's just me. So then we get to the aughts, right? In the last 15, 20 years, there's been an exponential expansion of web-based applications. You know, I can remember the first online shopping I did, how painful it was. In fact, I was scared to do it because you didn't know who was going to take your information. But now that's, it's ubiquitous. But in the 2000s, we had even more technology choices. We still weren't quite here. We had our phones that are actually computers, but we weren't doing everything on them. Right? It was still mostly web-based with a laptop or desktop type thing. But the technology choices were expanding. Testing, as I saw, especially going to conferences, became more of a career choice at that point. That's where I saw the switch sort of flip. I remember with our previous company going to meet with executives or managers and having to convince them back in the 90s why they needed to spend money on testing. It was sort of this necessary evil. In the 2000s, we stopped having those conversations. Then it was more about providing, the value, the most value out of what they knew they had to spend. And so testing as a career really became a big deal. Agile, which had been around for a while, finally started to take root. We started to see companies adopting Agile not just in name, but actually doing the practices, which helped break down those silos and move us closer from this I-based to these T-based skills. And all of a sudden, the user community was everyone, which helped drive some of that need for more testing. If you're customer-facing, if your customer is practically anyone who can log into a website or access a website, then you want to present the best face possible. And so bugs were a really bad thing. You couldn't hide it anymore. They were out there for everyone. And we started to see this idea that IT and business merged. That no longer are you an insurance company or a bank or a car manufacturer or whatever you want to throw out there. Now you're an IT company who happens to make your money through financial instruments or through this manufacturing process or whatever the case may be, research, whatever it was, but you're an IT company. And so this merger started to take place. And that happened just not that long ago. And so we have, I don't know if any of you guys know that movie reference. So it doesn't matter because no one's gotten the other ones yet. So we'll just skip that. We're just going to move right past it. All right. And here we are. We're in the late teens. The teens now, actually. We're in the teens. Wow. And what has happened? Apps are everywhere. So if you are a tester, this is the best time in the world to be a tester because everything has to be tested, right? And they're in your back pocket. How many of you have, raise your hand, how many of you have at least 100 apps on your phone? Easily. 50. 50. You got 50. Really? You don't have 50?
I have no idea.
You've got more than, you've got to know you've got more than 50.
Probably got 50 installed before you even...
Yeah, I mean, and the technology choices are unlimited. And what I mean by practically unlimited, you've got new languages popping up all the time. You've got, not only are those languages popping up, but they're being utilized on so many different devices or platforms that if you're going to test, right, you're not just testing. I remember the early days testing web-based application. The choice was, do we need to test just in IE, Internet Explorer, or do we do both IE and Firefox? Because that was your choice. And most of the time you just said, well, I'm just going to test with IE because nobody uses anything but that. That's not the life we live in today. Nowadays, you're going to test in Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer. Actually, IE is not even the most popular one anymore. Chrome is. Safari, if they're on a Mac. Nobody used Macs back then. And then you've got all the devices we've got to. So testing has become this necessity. And so the need to build teams, to build strong test teams, has gone up dramatically. Along with, while the need for testing is going up, the walls that used to keep us siloed and we just had to know about testing have fallen down. We're in an environment now where both literally and figuratively the walls that exist, those of you who have been to our offices, we have an open space where everybody can see and talk to each other. That's probably how many of you and your organizations look and feel today. It's open collaboration and communication constantly. Our user community is literally everyone, everywhere, and all the time. Anyone who has this thing in their back pocket is probably accessing one of your apps right now or one of your websites right now. And so IT and business, as a result, have become almost indistinguishable. Good news for us, right? Especially those of us who remember the days when testing was like, do you really want to do that? Or it was that stepping stone into the next phase of your career. Now testing is a career. It's something that people look at. And why not? Look at all the things that we have to test on. I mean, wearables. Whoever, we remember, they'll get smart, the shoe phone. Well, now you literally have computers in your shoes. I mean, it's not. Google got, we got everything. I'm seeing where they're building in, smart clothes. Who knows what else we have? All of this has impacted how we need to look at our test teams. And here's the thing. Most of our testing needs have been expanding. We need more testers, not less. Automation is helping take some of that effort, but it hasn't minimized the number of people we actually have to do that work. And if you're doing automation, that just means now you need people who are skilled in both understanding testing and development work to create the automation scripts. Along with the fact that because those walls have come down, we need to be able to talk more technical language than we used to. Again, when testers were siloed, it was all about test cases. I'll never forget teaching a class one time, and a tester literally said, I would never want to show a developer my test cases because then they'll just write the code so it works. I mean, you know, but that was the mindset. How many of you have worked with people like that? Surely, yes. I mean, the idea was, no, my job is to find bugs. It's not to provide value or make things better. That was the mindset back then. That was about 10 years ago now. So it hasn't been that long. But now the value we bring is preventing bugs. It's not just about finding bugs, but in order to do that, you have to have the right skills. It's not just about testing anymore. And because it's not just about testing anymore, that means we have to have an increased knowledge of the technical abilities, technologies that are out there. We have to be more familiar with automation. Even if you're not doing automation, you got to be familiar with it. You bring value, you add value by having all these extra skill sets. Now, how do we build test teams today? What's the most common model? And this is the one. I mean, you know, Zenergy, we've done testing. We grew up in testing. All of us have done testing for decades now, literally. So this is the process that we always saw. First, we got to identify the requirements. It's just like building an application, right? You got what skills do we need? What keywords do we need to find in that resume, right? So you're a manager of a test team. You got to know, okay, what do we want to do? What are the skills we need? That's the first thing we're gonna identify that experience, right? The next thing we're going to do, we're going to contact our HR office or some staffing agency. And we're going to tell them, you know, here's the job description. These are the keywords we want to look for. Go find us somebody. They go out and they look for people who hopefully have those skills. All right. And I say hopefully because then you start getting, you know, hundreds of resumes in, and they look great. But if you talk to people, that's a whole nother story. I cannot tell you how disheartening it has been. I have literally done thousands of interviews, and how frequently people try to get over on me. They read answers, they have predefined. We know for a fact we had someone actually interview, and a different person came to the office to do the work. It was obvious that person did not last long, but within 2 weeks we realized that this person did not have the skills of the person we interviewed. It's scary. It's scary. But that's still the model. The model is you get the resume, you review the resume, and based on the resume, you decide if you're going to go to the next step of actually doing the interview, which hopefully they do have the skills. So what do we see in today's resumes? You know, you've got these words that are bold or underlined because people know that's what's going to pop, right? And so that's what you tend to focus on is the thing that says, okay, they've got the requisite skill, but what they have is a resume. They don't necessarily have the skills that you need. Now, once you go through, you know, dozens, maybe hopefully not hundreds, but probably dozens of resumes, you start to identify the prime candidates. Yeah, they've worked in this industry, they've got these skills, this is the type of person I want. So you go through your interview process, and some organizations do it in much more depth than others, but typically it's someone working for an hour or so, you know, just a nice little discussion. You kind of get a feel for you know, is there some reality? Hopefully it's face-to-face, but in the example that I gave before, we learned our lesson. We don't do just phone interviews anymore. If it's a technical interview, if it's someone that we're going to move forward, it's got to be Skype or in person. So we want to lay eyes on them. And then eventually you go through the hiring process. So that's the normal. And anybody know of any other way to do it? Is that not, am I wrong? Is that not how we do it? Okay, good. All right, so I got it right. That's the common model. Now, what do we end up with? You got to have this testing. You need all these testers. What have we got? We've got these experienced individuals with hopefully the right technical skills that we actually need. Hopefully they've got what we need. We'll find out in a few weeks, right? In a month or so. They limited interaction and knowledge of their soft skills and ability to learn and communicate. In a 1-hour interview, sometimes you can get a pretty good feel for the oddball person, but most people can, keep it together. Their quirks don't come out, right? So hopefully they've got the soft skills. And why are soft skills so important today? Because those walls have come down. I don't want a tester who's going to run around screaming like Chicken Little every time they find a bug. I need them to talk intelligently to the developers and stakeholders about what the issue is and make sure everyone has the right idea around the prioritization. This is one of the issues we see all the time, and there's just no way to get around it. You hire this individual with these great skill sets, but they don't necessarily align with your current team. Or you're hiring several people and everybody's bringing different ideas of the best way to do things. And sometimes that's good. It increases the mix of how you're going to do your testing. But sometimes it leaves some gaps. Or you have people who have different ideas about how to do it and they end up not working well together. So what we really prefer is a cohesive team, not a team that's, we all just do it exactly the same and we never question each other, but really a team that at least gets along and has some of the same priorities in how they want to do their testing. All right, so what do we recommend instead? Some of the things are the same, but there's a key difference. And what we actually have done in the very recent past is we take a look at this idea that since we're looking for T-based skills and not just I-based, is why are we only talking to people who have 5, 10, 20 years of experience in test? Sure, that might be a good place to start, and depending on the level of test, if you need a manager, if you need a lead, you got to have that. But if you're looking for someone to do testing, why start with someone who's already got those years of experience? Why not find somebody who's maybe new to the game and you can bring them up the way you want them, right? You can talk to them about how you want to do testing. So here's what we do, and again, I've got some UNCG students here, so they can vouch for the fact that Zenergy actually does this. And I'm going to talk about a couple of different programs that we do that we think any organization can find value in. But this is the basic process. First, we start by sourcing from local universities. We create relationships. I'll go into more detail on each of these, but we create relationships with the local comp sci, computer science, and information systems groups, departments within the local universities. We do 2 levels of interviews prior to a job. It's going to be both technical and soft skills. We need people who can actually communicate, and it's not just about knowing the technology. There may be an overriding factor, and sometimes we'll go with someone who's more technical, but generally speaking, we want a balance. We do workshops. In the case of the guys we've got here from UNCG, we actually do a semester-long Selenium class. So we have a pretty good idea of how well they understand not only Selenium, but their communication, their soft skills. It's like an extended interview. And that's along the lines of this multi-day boot camp. And then eventually we bring in the successful candidates. So let me drive into that a little bit more in detail. So these are some of the universities we have relationships with. We have a very good relationship with the staff here at UNCG. As I mentioned before, we're working with our IT groups, computer science, math, business in general. I mean, just having a good business sense is very positive. So establishing those relationships is the first step. So if you're an organization, establish those relationships. And in North Carolina, we are blessed to have some really great universities local to almost any company. So there's someone to go talk to no matter where you are in North Carolina. I have done this presentation in other places, and that's not always the case. So again, we're pretty good here. We begin the filtering process by first, when we're talking to the universities, we're gathering information on the students. So a lot of times the instructors, the professors, have a good idea of who would be a good fit. They've probably seen the students over a number of years. So we get a little inside intel on people that way too. And then we meet with the classes. Sometimes we're doing mostly non-technical type conversations, again, getting a sense of their maturity, because you're pulling from a university, but also their general soft skills. And we're going to sort of evaluate, and it's fairly informal, but we're going to evaluate their ability to communicate, learn, and understand. Because what we ultimately want is we want people who are adaptable. As much as we know they don't have the testing skills yet, they haven't gotten the experience, but we want the adaptability to be able to get there. The next thing we do, and this is what I'm going to kind of switch gears is, I'm going to talk about a very specific example. We had a client in Chicago that needed to build a test team of about 6 to 10 people. The final number was just, whoever best suited. They knew they needed at least 6 and would take up to 10 if we found enough people. So the process we went through was, we're here in North Carolina, but we established relationships with some of the local universities in Chicago. We got information from the local company as to where they thought the best students would come from. So we targeted those. And then we start the filtering process. I think we ended up bringing in about 60 plus students initially, and filtered that down to about 15 to 20 people. And that was through that initial interview, just getting a sense on a non or informal basis, not too technical up front, but just are they good communicators? And what we're relying on is that if they're graduating from university, they're getting at least the initial level of experience and technology exposure that we need. Speaking of technology exposure, how many of you grew up with a computer in your house? Like, when I say grow up, I mean from the time you were 3, 4 years old. That's, when you were 3 years old, you had a computer? Oh, yes, there you go. So, I got my first computer when I was a teenager. When I was, I think, 14, a TI-99 Ford A, Texas. I still have it, Southern Miami. I don't count Palm. It's kind of a computer, but not really. You could just move it. So, but most people don't, my age, and even a little bit younger than me, most people didn't grow up that way. But kids today have grown up with technology. It's second nature to them. You don't have to teach them how to use a web browser. Actually, one of our clients had a need for a lot of web-based testing. They're an e-com organization. And what we found was it was actually easier to take kids out of school, because they already knew the web, they'd grown up with it, and teach them how to test than it was to take testers who had done anything other than that and teach them how to use web-based applications. I mean, it was crazy. But anyway, I got off the topic. Well, not completely. Anyway, so what we would do is we would then have the current test team or the development team run technical interviews. In this particular case, what the organization was looking for were candidates to have a good mix of both development skills and testing skills, because these were people who would start in manual testing but migrate into automation. That was the plan. Is there's going to be a period of an initial period of 2 to 3 months where they're focused on manual testing to kind of learn the organization, learn the business, and then eventually move into developing automation scripts. So we had an internal team. Some of our more technical testers would actually do the initial technical interviews and validate their technical capabilities. And again, reevaluating their soft skills. So not just can you answer the question, but how do you answer it? And if it's a particularly difficult problem, how do you handle that difficulty? Because sometimes you would get people who were combative, frankly. They didn't like the way you asked the question. Well, you know what? You're out, because difficulties happen in real life, and if you can't deal with us asking you that question, you're not going to deal well with the developer pushing back, when they say that's not a bug. All right, and that happens. So we looked at personality. We also did a cultural fit analysis. So we actually had the organization tell us, which types of soft skills were more important to them and which ones were less important. So we tried to evaluate as best we could there. That was a little more extensive than we normally would have done. From there, we invited the selected candidates to come to a one-day workshop. Now, in this particular instance, this was free to them. They didn't have to pay for it, but they did not get paid for this. At Zenergy, we have something called the ZenPro program where I don't know that we have anybody in here who's actually been through that. But most of our testers at Zenergy who were fairly new to testing went through ZenPro, and it's a one-day class. Basics on how to do testing, the importance of QA and how QA and testing differ. A little bit on automation, a little bit on agile. The real thing here is we don't expect people to come out experts in testing. And I'm frequently the person who teaches that class, but what I'm looking for is who seems to be getting the concepts, who asks great questions, and who has what I call the tester's mindset. I think that's on the next one. Yeah, so we use this as sort of a one-day interview process. It would be easy for an hour to fake it, but for a whole day, people can't fake it. Their true personality is going to come out unless they just stay absolutely quiet, in which case that's a red flag too. We don't bring anybody in that didn't interact. I look for the tester's mindset. The tester's mindset is, I don't do it in here, but in other presentations I have it more well-defined, but curiosity, a natural curiosity. Skepticism, not pessimism. I met a lot of testers who, it will never work. The sky is falling. Everything's terrible. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people who say, prove to me that it works. I look for that, in how they ask questions and how they answer questions. A desire to break stuff in a good way, not just randomly, but in a way that shows you that they can think of different possibilities and how they would do the testing. We can always teach technique, we can always teach technology, but if they have that innate ability to think that way, that's a real pro for us. Another thing, do you even want to be a tester? I'm very upfront. If you don't think that testing is something you want to do, enjoy the class, but don't look for a job. I don't want you to look for a job. I want you to look for a career. I want you to find what it is that you can be passionate about. And if you feel a passion based on what we're teaching, that's good. As I mentioned, we look for engagement in the class, comprehension, understanding. And I gauge that a lot through interaction. So that's the one-day workshop. Now, I should have mentioned this. This other model is going to require time. All right? But you'll end up with a better team for it. So yeah, the easy way out is go to a staffing agency, get 50 resumes back, look for the keywords, and if it matches, bring them in. That's fine if you want to do that, but I don't think you'll get the best team out of that. Now, the next thing we do is dependent upon what the organization actually needs. If they need, say, automation, then we're going to do a longer-term type workshop. If it's manual testing, we may actually just add another couple of days to extend what we previously taught, because in the one day we just present information. There's no exercises. You just don't have time for all that. But if they're manual testing only, then we'll do like a 2 or 3 day workshop where some of the same information is presented, but we actually have exercises and things like that. So they get a more hands-on feel of what they're going to be doing. And a practicum at the end of it to make sure that they clearly understood. But the process is, from that one-day workshop, in order to get into the multi-day workshop, you have to pass, right? And so it's a little bit informal, but we cull the list down, and then we get down. For this particular organization, we ended up with 8 people who made it. We started with more than 60 as potential candidates. We had 20 that made it into the workshops, the one-day workshops, and from there we got it down to 8. During that time, the client actually, they didn't sit in all the time, but we went to Chicago, we taught the class. The client would actually come in during portions of the class to observe on their own, and so they had some input as well on who we ended up selecting for the multi-day workshop. I've just got some, what do you want to teach? Well, what do they need to know? Maybe business related, it may be Selenium. We can teach it, you guys can teach it however you want to do it. But the idea is that you're going to take them through this multi-day workshop where they start to build some actual skills. So they've got the foundation. You got to put that in place. The other thing that we're doing over those multiple days is we're letting them start to coalesce as a team. Because this is the group, this is the final group, right, that in the end will end up working together as a team. So this is not, if you need 1 or 2 people, maybe the common model is the best way. If you need 5, 6 plus people, I would suggest doing something like this, because now when they come in, they don't come in as individuals with disparate skills. They come out already knowing some of the quirks and personalities of the different people, so they're working together, they're already collaborating, they've been through a shared experience, and it really boosts the productivity right out of the gate. During that last, that week or more, for the other client, it was a 2-week Selenium automation course that we did. But anyway, during that period of time, we're assessing their technical aptitude against their innate abilities. We're looking for eagerness, so a long-term willingness. Maybe they're excited enough in the beginning for the one day to still fake it enough, but do they really have not only the chops, but the desire to do it? And then the ability, like I said, to work as a team. Who gets along with who? And in fact, with that client, they nixed a couple of people because of some personality issues in working with everybody else. There was one person that was potentially on the cutting board, but her technical skills were so high it sort of overrode the desire to cut them from the team, and they just decided they'll kind of keep her kind of off to the side. But that was okay. So we're taking all of that into account, and what we found was this team, according to our client, this team ramped up within a month. Now, most testers, it takes a month to get their feet wet, to feel comfortable. This team, they came in, they felt comfortable already because they knew each other, right? They kind of come in with a posse, right? So there's a benefit there. In addition to that, we had already vetted them to the level where we knew they were going to be capable. We knew they were adaptable. We knew all of this going in, and so you're paying for the assurance. You're getting that assurance. You're paying for it with the time up front, but you end up with a much better team that functions much more quickly and effectively right out of the gate. The other thing is the cultural fit, and it's funny, when we first started the process, that was not something we considered, Zenergy, when we were doing this on behalf of our client, but the client actually brought it up to us. We need somebody, I don't want to say the name of the client, but they're in the financial industry, and so things they're regulated, but they're not a startup by any shape, but they have that mentality, and so finding the right people, you need like the best and brightest. If you're not up there, you're just not going to feel like you fit in. It's just the way that organization operated, and so we had to get the right cultural fit, and I think this helps with that as well. I've already mentioned this, the shorter introduction. I think although the investment is a little bit higher up front, the long-term costs are lower because you end up with, number one, a whole team that's already working together. Number two, it's less likely that you'll end up in a situation where someone has to be let go. Of all the people, we brought in 7 people, all 7 are still at that client, and that was over a year ago. So you have, in fact, the way that particular contract was set up was they were I think 6-month contract to perm, and after 6 months they would go perm, and they all went perm. Better insight into who you're hiring versus the common model. And that's the goal, is to make sure you know who you're actually bringing in and that they're going to be able to function at the right level. And so, now beyond that, you don't bring them in and then drop the ball, or you may already have an existing team. What do you need to do there? The easiest thing to do is lunch and learns. You can pull in, someone like me or Bob, any of the speakers that you have. We've got presentations ready to go, and we can do these lunch and learns on advanced topics. one of my colleagues, some of you know Mary Thorne, she, at her organization, IPREO, they have what they call a 52-week lunch and learn. So every week they have a new topic that they'll talk about. So over the course of a year, you get a set of different topics. And I thought that was a really good thing. It says conference presentations. What I actually mean by that is you ask an individual on your team to do a presentation. Right? So they have to study it. You may know that they already kind of know the topic, but you ask for a specific idea. I want you to present on this. It shows a little bit of drive on their part. It also gives them an opportunity to learn more about that area if it's something that both you and the organization are interested in. So as a manager, I suggest not just bringing in talent to talk to people, but actually having your own internal staff do some of that. Establish mentoring programs. So if you've got someone who's particularly skilled in an area, set them up with a regular office hours, just like we're here at the university, professors have office hours for tutorials to do tutoring and talking. Do the same thing with your best people in different areas. Not just the leads either, whoever has the right skills. And they have a little bit of time set aside each week or so that other members of the team can come and talk to them about issues. And I'll tell you, this happens anyway. You're just formalizing the process. I'm sure we've all run into that. You have this issue and you don't know how to handle it. You go talk to someone. Well, that's on an as-needed basis. This is a little bit more formalized. At Zenergy, we provide incentives for blogging and presenting. So we ask people to do regular blogs. One of our testers, Andrea, recently wrote a blog on some issues she had working with an organization that was transitioning to Agile and kind of the fits and starts of being a tester in a new Agile environment. And then, of course, there's training development, having people attend presentations and things like Zenposium or other conferences or just other formal training. And that's it. What questions do we have as I'm finishing up right on time?
Can you give us a few examples of things to look for or avoid on a resume?
Yeah, a couple of things that I have noticed. One is in describing their job at different clients, one of the things that I've seen that's kind of lazy and maybe indicative of not the right level of skills is you'll see essentially the exact same thing listed every time. And that tells me either they're pigeonholed or, in that there's only, this is all they really know how to do, and so they're doing it by rote as opposed to really thinking, or they're too lazy to really think about what it is that they did. And so in either case, I throw that as a red flag. That's an easy one I can think of. There's probably some others if I have a little more time to think. Yes?
Now what I've done is I call it a circle interview, which is technical, business acumen, and then soft skills. And usually when we go through that, that's when I hate to say catch people lying.
Yeah.
That's when all the red flags come out generally.
I did a phone interview one time, and the way the guy answered one of my questions was just so odd. The words were right, they were just it was oddly phrased, like no one actually talks that way, right? And so I pretended that I didn't hear him, and I said, can you answer that question again? And he answered it exactly the same way, and I knew he was reading an answer. So in a circle, I'm sure you're not doing that on the phone, but that certainly gives you the opportunity to evaluate different skills. Not related to the resume per se, but something else if you do phone interviews to look out for. Yes?
Now, in addition to that, my wife who works in recruiting has noticed a huge influx of people copying the job description that they got when they were hired directly into their resume. Not even bothering to go change the candidate will show the following skills.
It's keywords.
Yeah, it is. It's about the keywords.
So you mentioned that this group you hired in Chicago came in, I think you said, as a posse.
Yes.
When they came in as that group, that clique, did that cause any issues with them then integrating into the larger company? Because they were just a little coming into a bigger group?
That's a good question. From talking to the client, I never got the sense that that was an issue. There were some individuals who integrated more easily with their individual teams, because they were all testers in the test team, but this was an agile environment, and so they each had to integrate separately into different teams. So some of them had a little bit easier time, and you never know, that could have been the individual, or it could have been the personality of the team in general. But I didn't hear anything that they felt bad for having to be separated in some way from the team. It was a good question. I could go back and ask.
And one other question. You mentioned you were getting younger kids out of college and investing all of this, and it sounds like they haven't been there very long. But do you run into issues with turnover, especially nowadays in our industry? You invest all this money and a year later they're gone. Is that an issue?
No, it has not been for this particular client, and I can speak on, for Zenergy. Of course, we provide testers for some of our clients. I will be very honest with you. We have almost complete turnover from the original crop, but they stayed with us for about 2 to 3 years. It is definitely something to consider, that you've probably got 1 to 3 years before they start looking, because at that point they're more mid-level testers, right? So they're looking for the next thing. Within your organizations, you may have the ability to move them up. It's certainly something to consider, is what's the career path for them. At Zenergy, like I said, we've had turnover where if we didn't have a new client available for them to move into the next higher level, they would go somewhere else. It is something to consider.
Can you talk a little bit about building cohesive teams when you have a lot of offshore resources, and how to bring everyone together and how they're collaborative?
Yeah, so that presents a lot of problems, especially considering where they are. If they happen to be in India or China, and you've got such a huge time difference. We've had, I guess, in some ways, we've been fairly lucky that a lot of our clients where our testers have had to work have not had to deal with that as much. I might make some suggestions. I don't know if these would be completely appropriate for your organization, but I'd look for ways to do, maybe not a lunch and learn or mentoring program, but something where individuals can interact. Maybe it's a webinar type thing, where one person, either offshore or onshore, is presenting internally. So you create team cohesion because we're all learning about the same thing. We have a chance to maybe interact at a level that we don't normally get to interact. I might suggest something like that, but fortunately or unfortunately, it's not something that we've had to deal as much with. It's a good question, something to consider.
Yeah, so with your model of bringing people in from the college level, is the thought that if you do have longer tenure, that those people are moving up, and so you're just constantly filling the bottom and letting people internally promote.
That's right. Yeah, and in fact, that's what our other client has been doing, is a year in, those people who are ready to move up, moving up into more senior level roles.
I've got a two-part question. First, when you get these pool of college entrants, do you notice any particular academic discipline that most of them come from?
Well, we target math, computer science, and ISOM, so that's, we have that, but that's our own selection. I can't speak to whether or not, other, like people, like David has he had a double major in psychology. And I think actually psych majors probably fit well, especially for testing, because we have to, we all got something wrong with us. Sometimes testers are a little more out there.
And the second part is, in your experience, would you say that the #1 factor in a successful quality assurance candidate is truly personality instead of any academic or technical?
Yes, I would say, to me, I feel like if they have the right technical adaptability, I can teach them any of that, but I have been around over the years. I've been doing this for 20 plus years. I have seen a lot of testers that developers don't want to deal with, because they don't know how to communicate. I use this thing for years. I say, when you find a bug, you're calling the developer's baby ugly. All right? Your baby is ugly, and that's not nice. That hurts. And in order to present that message, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And for too often, too long, I have seen testers who don't know how to communicate that in a way that's, I guess, sensitive. But also, you want to be friends with the developers. You want them to want to work with you and trust that when you find a bug, it's real and that's a priority to them to take care of. Yeah. I'm sorry, I hit this one and then I come back to you. Yes.
So I work for a company and we've got some of your model down.
Good.
We've got some gaps to fill. But one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that, we have college students that we bring in, but we kind of just throw them in and let them learn as a trial by fire type of situation. The problem with that is that they don't learn the proper processes to go through.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, there's a steeper learning curve when
Yes.
it comes to the product. So how can I convince my management team, or what are some ways that I can get them to try and come up with a better integration?
Yeah, so the convincing is the hard part, right? The model is, I think, the easy part. What we did for our client is we had a standardized Selenium training class that we did, a boot camp that we did. And what we did is we asked them what additional processes or methods or, for example, how you manage a bug or what tools in addition to that you may want us to add in. And so we just fit in a couple of extra modules that took up about a day around that. So the preface is, let's spend a little bit of time on what the process is and how we operate, what good practices are for our organization, and then you follow that with the technical piece. I don't know if you're already doing the technical level training,
Right.
and if you do that in a formalized process, then maybe if you're limited in time and that's all the time you have, there's a trade-off between what our common practices are, our best practices, and some of the time that we're spending on the technical aspects. If you can expand it, I think that's even better. Because I suspect, you're talking about process, you have something, you probably have it documented in some way. It's just a matter of, yeah, and it's probably just a matter, in fact, going back to what I said earlier, hey, designate a member of your team. And it's not a conference presentation anymore or a mentoring program, but it's actually pulling that together into a presentation format to be that training, and maybe even have them deliver the training. Again, you want to look for ways to teach your team to grow, give them growth opportunities. Sometimes the growth opportunity is technical, but sometimes it's this stuff too. I'm a presenter. David's a presenter. We just happen to, for the most part, fall into it. We got, lucky we had opportunities to do that. Or in my case, I did a lot of training at some point, and so the training is what drove it. So this may be a good way to find that next rock star for the conferences. I heard a question here. Yeah.
We have, I work for a financial services firm. We have two different approaches to this. So we have something that's called LEAP, where we actually call from universities all over the country.
Yeah, yeah.
And then from that, we have them, they may be an intern, and then if they get recommended, they go through a boot camp. But we've done tracks, and we've collapsed the tracks so that as tester, audience, or developer, you actually have technical, soft, and business skills. So that's one path. And then once they go through a 6-month program, they actually have to do a project all the way through and deliver on something. And after that, they get placed based off the business needs. The other model, which we're trying, and I want to hear your opinion on this, is instead of bringing people from the bottom, because what we've seen is they get disgruntled, even coming from universities after 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So what we've done instead is we've looked at people who are in other types of jobs.
Yes.
Maybe
Yes.
customer service, operations, who want to go into a technical.
I short-circuited it. I'm all in favor of it.
And we put them through the training.
Yes.
So that you're actually regenerating and regrowing from within.
Yeah. And depending on the area, I will speak specifically to testing. So the program that we do, we intentionally open it up. It's not just for students. In fact, I would say probably half are students from universities and half are people looking to make a career change. We frequently pull people from customer service or client support type positions. One of the nice things is about, especially if you're looking internal for your own organization, they know the business and they know it very well. And they are going to be very attuned to the customer's perspective when they test. And again, in a different class, I talk about this. It's good to have, I didn't talk about it here, but it's good to have a difference of, a balance rather, of perspectives between both the technical and the non-technical or business aspects of what you do. It would be great to have all those skills in one individual, but barring that, what I look for is a balanced team, a team that has a good mix of both very technical people and people who are more customer-oriented, whether it's from their past or just their natural personality. But I'm all in favor of that. The thing about your LEAP program, I actually like that. That's an even larger investment than what we're talking about. So not all organizations are either large enough or have the wherewithal to make that level of investment. So this is maybe an intermediate step to doing something like that. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I hope you're enjoying the conference. We've got a panel discussion coming up shortly. I'm on it, and Chris is going to be asking us some questions. Hopefully, nothing too hard for us. We look forward to seeing you in the auditorium. Thank you.